Welcome, welcome, welcome to Tell Me Your Story. It is a program bringing you new paradigms for a new world. And we're here bringing this program to you this week, this particular week that you'll be listening specifically on the radio, but it still applies regardless, because we're going to be celebrating the blackjack version of World Sound Healing Day back again. I can't even remember how many years we've been doing this. Jonathan and Annie Goldman. And I thank you too for joining us. And it's wonderful. Andy, it's wonderful to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Richard. I am delighted to be here.
This is Andy's first time resonating with you, and what a blessing. We have a great communication together. So thank you for inviting her, because Andy has been an integral part of World Sound Healing Day since the beginning, and of course my life for close to 30 years now. Scary. All right.
We've been at this a long time, Richard.
Well, yeah. I'll tell you, it's something that I've been at least aware of. I don't know what, for about 10 years.
I think, you and Jonathan have been doing interviews a long time, because your name has been very familiar to me, Richard.
So I'm going to start with you, Andy, today, and talk to us about your involvement, your interest, your purpose in World Sound Healing Day that is taking place, folks. Let you know this, on a wonderful day, the 14th of February. Of course, here in America, it's Valentine's Day as well. But I don't know that it's that case around the world, but nonetheless, it's the 14th of February, where people participate in whatever way they choose to, creating sound and rhythm and humming or whistling or whatever it is that they do in that regard. How in the world did you get involved in this?
Well, how in the world did I get involved with this guy? And we have been together for almost 30 years, Richard. And World Sound Healing Day is an event that we facilitate every year, and we are coming upon our 21st year. Yeah. And as you mentioned, it is on February 14th, Valentine's Day. And just to give you a little background on my involvement, or our involvement, really, we were in deep meditation. And, we have been working with sound as a healing modality for personal healing. And it came to us in the meditation. It is now time for you to broaden that scope and bring sound on a planetary healing level. And of course, that was the message that we got. And we just looked at each other and went, now, transmission stopped. We have to figure it out. There was not a rule book or, any instruction how to do it. So that's when Jonathan and I really started processing and brainstorming and, coming up with February 14th, World Sound Healing Day. If we could get the word out there that on that day, if you can sound forth with the intention of holding compassion and love and healing for our beloved planet, Mother Earth, and all sentient beings, that is what our purpose, the foundational purpose of World Sound Healing Day is. And Jonathan, just jump in, because he was right there with me.
Yeah, at least if I could just suggest that we got, if you like, the communication of expanding our scope of being from personal to planetary healing, which seemed like a great idea. But the question then was, how do you do it? And we spent a while just kind of thinking about it and checking stuff out. And I remember I had the experience of, this is back before they had Zooms or any of these really visual platforms, etc. And I remember I was in a chat room. We had just done a 10-day teaching called the Healing Sounds Intensive, and I was in a follow-up chat room with a lot of the participants. We were where we were like sort of writing stuff together because I couldn't really do it vocally with a call and response thing. And I said, let's do an ohm together. And that's all. And we did an ohm, and literally we could feel the very fiber of being shift and change. And when that occurred, even though we were separated by space, particularly, we weren't in the same room. And so there was nothing going on. And yet, etherically, vibrationally, something was happening. And I said, how can this be? And then this happened. I realized that it had been my awareness for a short time before that the internet represented the neural net of the planet. I thought, how can we somehow activate the global heart of the planet? I don't understand this. How can we activate the global heart? And then I remembered that in all these different sacred traditions, including the Tibetan and whatnot, the link between the heart and the mind, between body and mind, is speech, is sound. And so, okay. And literally that very first World Sound Healing Day back in 2003, I literally was checking this out to do my homework to find out what was going on, because it's its 21st birthday. It's almost old enough to be an adult now. And yeah, and bottom line was that on that day, most of the events were happening live in different areas, but there were two global events that were interconnected by the internet, and they were through internet radio shows. One happened just around 9 o'clock in the morning, which would there be the 12 o'clock toning that occurred, for the first few World Sound Healing Days, because we thought that was just a great sound for people to make. What sound are you going to make? And then also it was around 9 o'clock at night, so that was about 12 o'clock in Tokyo.
Or the timing on it was, we realized that having it sounding forth with that sound at 12 o'clock noon Eastern time, was really going to be difficult for people all throughout the planet. So we have since, had it just be wherever you are, whatever time works well for you. But, it's interesting, Richard, because Jonathan, about 40 years ago, he's been in this field. He's a founding pioneer in the field of sound as a healing modality. He created a formula that I want to share with our audience. Frequency plus intent equals healing. In other words, the sound that we make coupled with our intention equals healing. And so that was a strong premise for working even globally with sound, because if we can hold the intention of compassion, of appreciation, of healing, and then sound forth, holding that intention, we could possibly make a difference. And so that was sort of part and parcel too of how we, came about World Sound Healing Day.
We're on a roll, but let you say something, my friend.
Well, I want to let our listeners know that if you want more information, you can there is a website that is called World Sound Healing Day. And is it a .org or .com?
.org.
Is it .org? All right. So worldsoundhealingday.org. And with this particular interview, that will be the link that we will be tied to. But it'll also take you to a lot of the links that Jonathan is connected with, he and Andy, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is a pleasure to be making the sounds that we are here on this particular program as I watch it being created on my recording device on my screen. And it's kind of an amazing thing, Jonathan. I've shared this with you before. And before I share this with you, and that has to do with an event I attended, gosh, it has to be at least 23, 24 years ago back in Phoenix with Wayne Dyer, but I will share that in a moment. There's a phrase that most people are familiar with in this country in particular, and you alluded to it, but it's in like as we like to talk about this ancient wisdom teachings. In the beginning was what? Not light. It wasn't anything of darkness or whatever. In the beginning was the Word, which I want to say implies, but it doesn't imply. It actually says it emphatically, was sound. In the beginning was sound. And from that sound, now where the sound came from, I have no clue. Okay. All we know is that's what the ancient wisdom teachings tell us. And from that sound began to be created the material world. So when we talk about World Sound Healing Day, Jonathan, what is it that, are there specifics that we are looking at to try to create? Or are we just putting the energy out there like a Reiki master would and saying, okay, here's the energy, do with it what you will, person or situation?
Great question, Richard. And before I answer that, I just want to allude back to an event. You were going to talk about a Wayne Dyer thing. I want to hear about that one.
Yes.
But I'm going to take you back even further than Wayne.
Okay.
I'm going to take you back to 1969 and an event that took place in Bethel, New York. Bethel, which is actually Hebrew for house of God. And that event was called Woodstock. And Woodstock began with Swami Satchidananda getting, they say it was 500,000 people. No, it's probably closer to Richie Havens speculated, who's the opening act. Swami Satchidananda opened it with prayers. But I think there were 1 million or more people there. And we were all chanting sacred mantras. And I got to tell you, my friend, I am convinced that that is the reason why, if you like, Woodstock is the paramount gathering of people that was peaceful, kind, and compassionate. Yeah, with an audience that large, a couple of people are going to die and a couple of people are going to be born. But can you imagine nowadays if you got even sometimes you get a dozen people together and it's mayhem. But there you had a million people. So that was what, and that I know permeated my consciousness, because the idea of World Sound Healing Day basically is, wow, if we can somehow project energy, conscious energy that's sacred. Okay, and bottom line, what is sacred sound? Sacred sound is sound made with love, appreciation, kindness, compassion. We know of the work of heart math, for instance, that talks about this heart-brain coherence. And the bottom line of there is that if we can be in a state of appreciation and gratitude, our electromagnetic field grows anywhere from 50 to 500 to even 5,000 times greater. And then if we couple that with making sacred sound, the field becomes just innumerably larger and more powerful. So the idea then is that our field personally can interface with what we call the Gaia matrix, or the field of Mother Earth. And just incidentally, the concept of, do you know where the term Gaia came from?
No, I don't.
I think it was from the ancient Greeks, but there was a fellow by the name of Pierre Desjardins, who was a well-known philosopher of the last century. And he talked about something called the noosphere, which was the, if you like, field of consciousness of the earth, which he perceived of as being a major, I believe he was a Jesuit priest, a very well-known philosopher, but the field of consciousness of our planet, and that it was a living, thriving thing. So we are speculating that with our light, our love, and our sound, we can somehow interface with this and help it thrive, be one of compassion and kindness, which I think this planet needs at this particular point in time and space.
I even saw the documentary about Woodstock 2.0, which was, I'm going to say, based upon the documentary I saw, an unmitigated disaster, because they were trying to duplicate something that can't be. It would be like trying to duplicate the creation of the universe. Let's do it again.
Well, Richard,
Can't
as you're
do
talking
it.
about that,
You can't
Andy
do
and
it
I
consciously.
Andy and I both watched that, and it was amazing because I was saying, okay, the difference between that and the original is the original is sort of based upon almost like a philosophical concept, a construct of brotherhood and sisterhood, and there we were. And this one was based on greed.
Yeah, yeah. And
Bottom line,
yeah,
marketing.
yeah. It's really unfortunate. The story in regards to Wayne Dyer has to do with a gentleman by the name of Stephen Lewis. Now, my wife and I went there to hear Wayne Dyer speak, and it's funny how after his passing, I thought, oh, it sure would have been great to have gone to hear him speak. And it's like, how much of an idiot are you? You were at one in 1998, 99. Anyway, so we're there, and at intermission, he introduces Stephen Lewis, who wrote a book called Sanctuary. And Stephen Lewis had created this concept called EMC squared. It's not Einstein's theory of relativity. It has to do with taking a photograph, and he puts it in his computer. You send him a photograph head to toe, puts it in the computer, and sends out these waves, this energy, if you will, to help to put you in different areas back into balance. Well, I was thinking about that as I had read the book, and I'm sitting there I came up with this as I was sitting there listening to him. And I drew on the back of one of my business cards. And of course, Jonathan and Andy, you know what this looks like on a screen when you're creating a sound wave. And let's say you're creating true separation, left-right separation, stereo signal, and you have a left and a right channel on your screen. You have different sounds, but you also have some similar sounds. And of course, the way he was describing this, I'm thinking, okay, so what if you took one of those channels and you flipped it out of phase? And then you mixed the two channels together. What would happen? So at that time, I was using Cool Edit, the program.
Yeah,
I'm still
Cool
using
Edit.
it. Yeah, I'm still using it today.
I'm still using it too.
Yeah. And I say if it's good enough for the BBC, it's good enough for me. I don't need to go to Pro Tools or anything else. Anyway, so I tried it. And what happened was I was actually, in some instances, I actually took a monaural left-right, took the one channel out of phase, mixed them, disappeared. There was nothing there, no sound at all. But when I took a true left-right separated stereo signal and I took the one channel out of phase and then I mixed them together, I'm going, hey, I just created my own, shall we call it sing-along or karaoke, because the vocals, they were still there. They're not eliminated. They're pushed all the way into the back. And the instrumentation on each channel was brought to the forefront. And you could then do a sing-along, and no one's really going to hear the vocals in the back because they're just too far back there. So I'm drawing this on my business card. And I go up and I show this to Stephen Lewis when the opportunity presented itself, and he was rather amazed. And I remember talking with his, they called him a bulldog. She was the woman who basically sort of threads the needle for people to either get to or stay away from Stephen Lewis. I shared this with her, thinking that she was sort of on the same page as him. And after I shared this with her, this was the reason why I brought this up. She said, oh, nope. You cannot talk about that. No. He will not talk about that because, we don't want that kind of information to fall into the wrong hands. Well, there were two things that popped up in my head. Number one was, so you're telling me that I'm the only human being on the planet that came up with this that realized that this can be done. See, back in the 80s, I was working for a Christian station, and the engineer was putting in a turntable. And he plugged in the cords, he plugged in the RCA jacks, and we put a record on, and it sounded like one of those, again, a karaoke sing-along tapes. And I said, well, that doesn't sound right. He said, oh, hang on a second. He unplugged it, and he redid the wire, and they plugged it back in, and boom, the vocals came to the forefront. He says, I was out of phase. That's how I remembered that concept. And then the other thing was, What do you mean he won't talk about it? That's important. That's an important element that needs to be discussed because other people could use this for, and I didn't even think about it as nefarious reasons. But let's talk about this aspect of the power of sound, not just the power of words, because they are very powerful, Jonathan and Andy, but the power of sound. Whatever that sound is, I used to moan as a kid when I was sick, and my mom told my sister, "Oh, no, no, that's how he heals himself."
Mm-hmm.
But there's sound that has been used, let's say, around the world at these different diplomatic buildings where people are all of a sudden experiencing these major physical diseases. Okay, they're temporary because once they leave the building, and they say that was generated by some kind of subsonic or some kind of sound that the ears can't hear, but the body picks up on. I don't want to talk about the harmful aspects, but I want to talk about the power of sound when we're talking about the World Sound Healing Day.
Well, beautiful. And Richard, thank you for that story. And that is a topic I would love to talk to you about at another time. But since we're focusing on the healing use of sound, I would just like to suggest that anything from my perspective that can be used for good has its opposite level if that is one's intention. Since it's our intention to be using sound for healing, we'll talk about that. But bottom line, there are two ways that sound can affect us.
And I will tell you about those two ways and pop into the conversation here. So sound affects us either vibroacoustically or psychoacoustically. And psychoacoustically is when the sound goes in through our ears, travels down our auditory pathways into our brain, and affects our nervous system, affects our heart rate, our brain waves. But we're listening, we're hearing these sounds coming in. Now, vibroacoustics is when we actually feel the sound in our bodies. For instance, if we were to use a tuning fork, that would go directly into our body. You know, there are sound beds. There are all kinds of devices where the sound directly goes into our bodies at a cellular level. Now, when we talk about the power of sound, what I want to mention, speaking of vibroacoustic sounds, we know that when we are making a sound as simple as a conscious humming sound, it affects us powerfully vibroacoustically. In fact, we think with our research and our experience that it is the most powerful vibroacoustic sound that we can make. So when we talk about the power of sound, we know we want to hold the energy of positivity around that and get that information out.
Want to jump in with a quote from the New York Times Science section, February 8th, 1988, talking about ultrasound, but it could have just easily been talking about sound within the audible range. Sound shaped into dazzling tool can make, break, or rearrange molecular structure. And if you can rearrange molecular structure, people say, well, what sort of conditions can be healed with sound? I say, potentially, if you can rearrange molecular structure, what can't be healed? And I'm just going to suggest that a lot of the research that's currently going on with sound and music works more with psychoacoustics. That's the sound going into our ear, into our brain, sticking people into MRIs and seeing what's going on there. And that's brilliant. But there's also an element that we're right now ignoring, and this is the vibroacoustic level. And of course, that they work together, they're not separated. But really, something for people to be aware of is the fact that if you make a sound, it'll resonate and vibrate in your body, even when you hum. It'll resonate in your throat, but it'll resonate in your sinus cavity, in your forehead, in your chest, all over. Part of that, depending upon the intentionality of where do you want it to project.
And in addition to that, when we are making a sound, even such as the humming sound, there are so many physiological benefits that are happening. There are hormones that are emitted, oxytocin, the trust hormone. We feel great, we feel good and connected when we are toning in a group or we are sounding together. Melatonin is released when we're humming. Our heart rate is lowered. Our blood pressure is lowered. And there's an incredible molecule called nitric oxide that is also released.
And nitric oxide is so big these days because in the 1990s, it received the Molecule of the Year award from Science magazine. Whoa. And nitric oxide is a vasodilator, meaning that it widens and loosens our circulatory system, so it allows blood and oxygen and all this stuff to move more freely through the body. And it is also an antiviral agent, which is way cool. If we can, and particularly when we hum, we hum with our mouth closed, projecting the sound a little bit into our nasal cavity. You get 15 times the amount of nitric oxide that is being generated, which is actually a therapeutic level, which is really good for any critters that lodge there before they lodge into other parts of our body. So, we've had lots of people with conditions such as sinusitis who've used humming to heal that when, different antibiotics have not been as effective. Amazing.
It truly is. And the interesting thing to me is that there is no specific note, shall we say, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that is required. It's whatever you generate. Like when I was moaning, when I had the flu and I was laying there in bed, and my sister said, "Mom, make him stop. He sounds awful." Whatever the tone was the tone that came out, and I didn't necessarily feel better immediately. However, it certainly was more of I was more comforted, if you will, by doing that than not doing that. We're talking with Andy and Jonathan Goldman. We're also talking about World Sound Healing Day, worldsoundhealingday.org. It's the 14th of February, 2023. It's the 21st celebration, if you will, or participation. We hope that you will participate. I find it interesting that it's on the 14th. It's the 21st anniversary thereof. So you've got multiples of 7. That's got to mean something. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out in a moment as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is always a pleasure to have Jonathan and Andy Goldman here on the program to talk about sound and the work that you have been doing for over 40 years. You and I kind of share that timeline because I've been, it's funny too, because I was talking with somebody about this. I said, "Oh yeah, I started in 1979. And it turns out that actually it started for me when I was 12 years old, when I interviewed my very first interview with a local, back in Phoenix, a local TV and radio man by the name of Pat McMahon, who was on a kids show called the Wallace and Ladmo Show. And I was 12 years old. I had one of these cassette recorders, and I had, all this stuff. And I went in there. I wish I still had that tape. Boy, it would be nice to have. But I have a photograph of he and I afterwards. Of course, I went in with one of those tank tops, those muscle shirts that kids would wear then. real professional there. So it's like, okay, so now it's actually been a lot longer than that, which is okay. But we've all been involved in this concept of sound since even before our inception or conception, if you will.
Well, if you think about it real quick, there was a brilliant otolaryngologist by the name of Alfred Tomatis, who some people consider to be the Einstein of the ear back in the 1980s and 90s. And he wrote a wonderful book called something like Conscious Listening, but he talked about the fact that in utero, the ear develops before the brain. The brain literally grows out of the ear. so that in I think 8 or 9 weeks in utero, the fetus responds to sound. And I'm going to take this one step further and take this, if that's the alpha, in the omega. There's a book called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is basically a tracking of what happens to the spirit after the body dies. The true name of the Tibetan Book of the Dead is the Tibetan Book of Hearing upon entering the bardo, or the place of, so great liberation upon hearing. So in other words, hearing first sense to basically encode in the body, and the very last to leave.
Interesting. You know, what also fascinates me is a documentary on death that I saw. They got all of the necessary permissions and everything to take this individual who was terminal, very close to death, and they placed him on this. Ostensibly, it was sort of like a morgue table with a scale. And what they wanted to do, this sort of ties into what you're talking about in terms of what happens next. They wanted to find out if the weight of the physical body changed after death. Now, every time I tell the story, they say, well, yeah, but the fluids, they come out. And I said, no, you don't understand. If any fluids did come out, anything did come out, it's on that table. So as soon as they were able to determine that the consciousness left the body, that now the body had ceased to function, it actually did lose weight. Maybe an 1/8 or a 1/16 of a pound, but it lost weight.
I think it might have been 7 ounces. I think that's the magic number.
Yeah. I don't know what the weight, but the fact is, something that was there wasn't there anymore. What was it, and where did it go? And it makes it an interesting speculation, because you sit there and you go, well, wait a minute. If we're spiritual beings having a physical human experience, our spirits have a tangible weight to them? That's interesting. I mean, that opens up another sort of another box there.
One that I'm very interested in too, Richard. And I know we want to keep it back into the world of sound, but as we're talking about, the sound is the last sense to go when we do pass over. And then it's the first one. So once again, we're talking about the power of sound.
Yeah.
And as I think about us passing over, let's get back into our life and take our sounds and really heal and bring loving kindness and compassion through our sounds to our everyday lives, so that when we are on that table and we're making that, we can go, hey, we lived a good, loving, kind life through sound.
Just want to interrelate that Andy, as a licensed psychotherapist, and also did a lot of hospice work. So this, you touched on something that is a whole topic that a lot of people are really interested in. We usually talk mostly about sound, but the, if you like, passing on of the spirit is really reaching mainstream consciousness, and what a blessing.
Well, it's part of life, and it's a part of life that people, like even you mentioning it on your program just now, Richard, is just really so, and I think very enlightening. And then of course, when we, bring it back to the world of sound, we can utilize our own voices, our own sounds to really enhance our lives and to reduce stress and bring in balance. And so, when we're working with sound on an everyday basis, that's what happens. And then, of course, for World Sound Healing Day, we just hope there's so many people that are working with sound that the balance of our globe, of our Mother Earth, will come into play.
But I just want to jump in for one last second. That is Andy speaking and whatnot. I think that and I know that you know this, but anybody who's listening, one of the most important sound healing vehicles around is a conversational voice. And that if we can use our voice with, as you do all the time, with projecting kindness, compassion, wisdom, and whatnot. That is healing, man. Our ears hear it, the energy field. We are projecting energy when we speak. So everybody who's out there, be conscious of your words. And
well, it's how we feel, and what we're feeling when we're, speaking those words. And once again, going back to that formula, frequency plus intent equals healing, even with our conversational voices, holding that intention of
absolutely. I couldn't agree with the two of you more. That's why I refer to these programs for myself as therapy.
I love that.
I say it, I used to say it tongue in cheek, but it really is, because it does give me the opportunity to talk about certain things. And staying in the context of sound, when my sister passed away almost a year ago, my eldest sister, I could hear her. And she was basically saying a little laughter and saying, she was saying, "Hey, Richard, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." And I remember a year ago when I was talking with her on the phone, and she was not one to shy away from the hard questions. I asked her if she was ready. And she said yes and no, to which I said, "Come on, Jeanette, seriously, yes and no." Well, no, because she didn't want to leave her husband behind. But from a spiritual standpoint, she expressed quite emphatically, quite calmly. And even when I saw her at Christmas, the previous Christmas, that month before, she was that calmness. And she said, "Yeah, I'm ready. I'm not afraid." And I thought, oh man, that's fantastic, because there isn't anything to be afraid of. Now, she has her own philosophies, her own beliefs that help her not to be afraid, but it doesn't matter. It's like, I don't care why you're not afraid. I'm just glad that you aren't. I'm not afraid either. If today was my day, God forbid, I'm ready. But I still have much more to do. There's still much more that we all want to do. But Stephen Wright, a great comedian, said, "Yeah, I just found my birth certificate, and it turns out there's an expiration date." Our bodies all have an expiration date. One of the things that I would like to talk about now in terms of sound. Now, you talked about humming. I made the reference to moaning. And a matter of fact, I share with people all the time, if you're not feeling good, and yeah, okay, if you're a little embarrassed about this, then go into your bedroom and close the door. Go ahead and moan. It's okay. Even if you just do it low to yourself. But then there's also humming. There's, I know there's whistling and that kind of thing. But you say that the conversational voice, such as what we're doing here, would you say it is what actually does carry, shall we say, the most power and or intention in that regard?
Can I just jump in? I'm going to let Andy do this because she has one of the great conversational healing voices that I know of.
Oh,
but
yes.
I would suggest that what happens when you stub your toe? You make sound. You make sound, and that is called toning. It's a natural response to pain. Very simply, some years ago, I was interviewed by the New York Times asking me about it. I came up with 7 hypothetical answers as to why there could be everything from, it doesn't matter because we don't know for sure. What we do know is that the use of sound when we're in pain helps alleviate the pain. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Whether moaning, screaming, but probably better. I got to share this real quick story with you. Okay, I got to. It is, oh God, 40 years ago, and I am in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I am just so angry, and I really needed to scream. I just really needed to let it out, and I didn't want to do it around the neighborhood because, boy, I think they would have thought that something heinous was happening and called the police. So I had my friends take me out into a bit of a wooded area, and I let go with a really extraordinary, kind of like if you ever saw The Wrath of Khan when Kirk is screaming, "God!" except more. And immediately, I basically popped vertebrae out in my neck and my spine. And I was like, get me to a chiropractor. Now, blessed be, my dear friend at the time was a chiropractor who, we brought us over to his office, and he immediately popped me back in. But I thought, okay, that's the only thing about using your own self-created sounds. Sometimes if you're so angry and whatnot, don't constrict, because I was constricting when I was making the sound, and it obviously backfired. So you got to kind of be fluid, which is why an or moan rather than
Yeah.
Sharing that. Now, Andy, back to the conversational voice.
Well, thank you for that story, Jonathan, because, I think a lot of people have done just what you shared because, they hold it in. And of course, as a therapist, as a holistic psychotherapist, I'm all for moving that energy because that is emotion. It's energy in motion. That anger needed to come out. And there are ways that you can do that where you're not going to pop a vertebrae out. And screaming into a pillow would have probably been very helpful. But with our conversational voice, we carry a frequency. We carry many frequencies, not just one, but we are resonating to what our intentions are. Like if we're in a really bad mood and we would see someone and go, oh, hi, I love you. Well, you really don't mean that. But if you're in a really good mood and you see, your husband or your spouse, I love you, honey, you feel that. So my point is that with our voice, we are feeling a frequency. We are feeling the resonance of those words that are coming out. And so that's one of the reasons why, our words can really be inspiring. They can be energetic. They can be helpful on many, many levels if we are holding that intention truly of having compassionate understanding for situations and for people, holding that. And it's not that easy to do.
Right.
And so we have to work at it and we have to be conscious.
Just have to jump on real quick. I used to, a long time ago, work with a fellow by the name of Dr. John Diamond, who is responsible for bringing behavioral kinesiology to at least, the American shores, and literally harsh words. And, you can speak the words, I love you, and encode them with some sort of venomous froth. And not only will you feel like you've been psychically slimed, but if you use kinesiology, your body goes weak. Your musculature and your nervous system go weak.
Yeah.
Interesting. We're talking with Andy and Jonathan Goldman, and we're talking about some very fascinating things here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is always a pleasure to have Jonathan and Andy Goldman on the program as we're talking today about World Sound Healing Day, February 14th, 2023. You can take the entire 24 hours and make all the sounds that you want in terms of your intent to help the planet to heal, help yourself to heal, help our societies, our civilizations, institutions, our families. The list goes on. And it fascinates me to no end, considering the business that I'm in, dealing with sound. I have found so many different pieces of music, of sound. Yours, Jonathan, I've got file after file after file that I go back and I listen to from time to time. Stephen Halpern, I used to listen to back in the 70s. I've had him on this program before as well. And many other people who are creating, there are those who are actually writing songs from, I want to say, more of an intuitive perspective than scientific, but somehow when someone listens to it and has that wonderful brain, that scientific brain, they're able to analyze it and say, oh yeah, what you've created here is pretty spectacular because here's what these sounds are doing. And they'll go through this long explanation, this sort of diagnostic, if you will. But there are people who are doing this. And one of the things that I find interesting with vocal music is that that is a slightly different form, I want to say, of conversational speech, of talk, because they are sharing from the heart. Many of them are sharing from the heart. As a matter of fact, if you go back and you take a look at the top artists in different genres, odds are the songs that they had hits with were songs that they wrote or the songwriter wrote from that heart perspective, from that personal experience. I think of one in particular, Adele, John Denver, Harry Chapin, and what a great storyteller he was, Dan Fogelberg, many, many others, and those are of my era.
Richard, let's go back even further. I think
sure, absolutely.
That Sinatra was, people say he was the greatest singer. I don't know about that, but he certainly made you believe it was a very good year when he was 17.
Yeah.
And bottom line, he really encoded the emotion onto the song, and people picked it up. And I think you just nailed one of the key ingredients of music, sound, and everything is encoding emotion upon sound.
Well, and people remember how they felt, how they feel when they're hearing sounds or songs or what music that has been encoded with love and appreciation. They remember how they feel. They may not remember the words, but they will remember how they felt when they heard Frank Sinatra sing. It was a very good year. Oh, it was a very good year for me. I remember. And so it's feeling is such an important aspect of sound when we're talking about sound.
Well, what's interesting is it takes us to a new level. And that is, because I was just thinking about this, the heart. It has its own rhythm and sound. If you have a stethoscope or if you put your ear up to your partner's heart or your friend or what have you, if they'll let you do that, you can hear the boom, 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 boom. Or as a friend of mine taught me, and he told me, says, if you stand in the corner, face the corner, and you do that in a crowded room, people will start to freak out. They wonder, what in the world is that? The sound of the heart, the rhythm as well, and how we feel from the heart. As a matter of fact, when you mentioned heart math, that's part of where that thought came from. And I have to wonder, too, how these different sounds. I think about when I'm on the road and a car comes up alongside me and they have the bass turned way up and their car is rattling.
It's levitating.
The vibration is going into my car and it's like, no. This is not what I want. Plus the fact you may want to take your vehicle to the mechanic because you are loosening the nuts and bolts in your vehicle as well as in your body. But what about that aspect of incorporating sound into one's life and wanting to direct it towards the heart, not so much as the muscle, but as the feeling part of one?
Well, I think real easily, once again, heart math deals with the heart-brain coherence or the entrainment between the heart and the brain for both the rhythms of the heart and the brain to get in some sort of synchrony together. They call it coherence. And the easiest, most powerful way of doing that is simply to take some nice deep breaths, slow deep breaths, and be in a space of appreciation. And with that in mind, I'm just going to bring us back to World Sound Healing Day for a moment and say that it is our desired intent that there are probably going to be by February 14th, a couple of hundred at least different events happening throughout the planet in dozens of different countries. And these are, it used to be making the ah sound with compassion, but now we opened it up to just whatever type of sound or music you want to do, whether it's crystal bowls, mantras, kirtans, jazz music, classical music, poetry, guided meditations, it doesn't matter as long as you do it with the intention of kindness, compassion, and love. And with that being said, I also want to invite people who are hearing this to go visit the site, because you don't have to do an event. There are going to be hundreds of different events that you can listen to, that you can take part in. And it's incredible.
Well, I wanted to say that World Sound Healing Day is all inclusive. It is open, and we invite everyone, because you can participate in an event that's posted in the portal, or you can even post your own event in our portal. But it's all inclusive, and the more people that we can invite and encourage that will sound together in whatever way they choose, on February 14th, it's going to send this beautiful sound wave, this ringing of this loving compassion and healing all around our beautiful planet.
And Richard, as you know, there's been some scientific data to indicate that these events of prayer, meditation, sounding with compassion, appreciation, whatever you want to call it, that is positive, they literally interface with the field of our planet, and they make a shift and change. So it does make a difference. So on a level, even though I don't think the science has yet captured the aspect of what is really occurring, there's data to indicate that this is real and that we indeed can have an effect.
And speaking of data, I would like to know, with your association with HeartMath, if they have been monitoring. I know they're always monitoring, but specifically before, during, and after the 14th of February, if they have noticed these kinds of spikes that they talk about when it comes to this whole aspect of the human experience and intention, and again the whole aspect of healing during World Sound Healing Day.
Well, the Global Consciousness Project, which HeartMath is a part of, certainly has shown that since the very first time that Roger Nelson, the creator of the Global Consciousness Project out of Princeton, New Jersey, basically showed us a graph, and what should have been a straight line, if it was just nothing was going on, looked like Mount Everest, because it was an indication that indeed there is a shift and change in the noosphere, the vibrational field, the Gaia matrix, and we can make a difference.
I think the other aspect of it too is, yes, our intention is to send out healing. How that will manifest, what that will actually look like, I would have to say we kind of have to let our expectations kind of rest. We have to let the universe use the energy that we're sending out. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's beautifully said, Richard, because, we hold the intention and we then let it go. We send it out and let it go and vibrate and resonate in the highest good for all. Whatever that might look like is sort of the intention that we hold.
Total agreement on my part too. So yeah, it's how you say let it be. It's one of the great tenets of Tibetan Buddhist knowledge, which is very, very clear, is number one, be in a compassionate state, and also be in a non-attached state. So don't be attached to the outcome, and just so, if you trust in the Force, Luke.
Enjoy. Yeah, exactly. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey. We are talking about World Sound Healing Day. WorldSoundHealingDay.org is the website. It's the portal where you can find out about all kinds of events that are going on all over the planet, or you can create your own and post it. We certainly hope that you'll do that. As we continue here on Tell Me Your Story, I'm Richard Dugan, and I want to thank the two of you for joining us here on the program. This has been a fabulous conversation that has generated certainly some wonderful energy that I am very much aware of and can feel, but also hopefully has generated that kind of energy with the listeners as well as yourselves. And I have those wonderful 3 questions that I love to ask my guests at the end of every program. I will ask it of the two of you as we are celebrating our 15th year, ladies and gentlemen. 15 years we've been doing this program, and plus, I should say, and we've been asking these questions, and we'll do that in just a moment. But first, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m. We are streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. Oh, don't forget about the 9 a.m. Wednesday broadcast. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We also ask you to go to the podcast and subscribe, listen, get notifications when we post a new one. SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And we're on YouTube. You can watch these interviews. You can see Andy and you can see Jonathan's wonderful tie-dye t-shirt there. I think it's fabulous. I really love it. And we also ask you to participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s, where we ask you to go within, and in conjunction with World Sound Healing Day, listen to the still small voice. But don't just listen. Follow the promptings. Not going to hurt you. May challenge you at times. I've been challenged, but will never put you in harm's way. And if you'd like to support the work that we are doing financially, we have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when you go there to punch in the information, they're going to ask you for an email address to whom you will be sending the support to. And it is richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. And with that, we go to our three questions, and I'm going to bounce it back and forth to each of you. I'm going to inaugurate Andy with the very first question. Who is Andy Goldman?
Okay, let me tune right in. Who is she's still trying to figure that out.
Who is Jonathan Goldman? I'm going to answer for Andy first. She is the angel of sound. No, she is the angel of love. I am the angel of sound. And we're both trying to bring light and love through sound onto the planet.
I love it. I love it. Next question, Jonathan. What is your life's purpose?
To bring light and love through sound onto the planet.
Andy, what is your life's purpose?
To be a beacon of light that can help people to feel the light within themselves.
And now to the two of you, I hope that you get the movie reference. Andy, what was your best day?
What was my best day?
It's today.
Richard, my best day is today. I've had many best days, but I think the best day is right here and right now. And being in the moment, being in the present moment. I made it my best day.
And Jonathan, how about you? What was your best day?
Ditto. And I'm going to ask you on or off, what movie is that a reference to?
City Slickers.
Oh, I didn't.
Remember, the three of them were horseback riding, and they got to chatting away and talking about what their best day was. Mine started in 1993, Labor Day weekend. I was camping with some buddies. I had a little altercation the night before. The next day I get up, he's gone because he had some medical things he had to go to down at Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale. We were up in the White Mountains of Arizona. I had helped to refurbish a boat of his. And I said, I'm getting up. I'm going to make myself some breakfast. I'm going to do the dishes, clean up the camp. And then I'm going to put that damn boat in the water. And I rode it back and forth and back and forth. And I came back and I started a huge fire for one hot dog. And then the other buddy came up in his vehicle before the gentleman who had the medical exam. And he brought with him a big old pot, and he had a bone-in ham and a big old pot of beans, and he stuck the ham in the beans, and we sat there watching it simmer. And he had with him a bottle of Jack Daniels and beer, and we just sat there, and we had the greatest evening that I have ever had.
Wow.
That was that was when I was 33 years old. And I shared this experience with my mother years later and said, that was the day, as Robert Bly might say, that was the day I became a man. And she says, well, it was about time. And I kind of had, okay, Mom, thanks. But that led to a string of 30 best days, one right after the other. And that's where that question comes from. And again, a lot of folks answer the same way you do today, right now, this moment. Others have different answers, but that's the reason we ask. And we've changed the questions out. I've always asked about life's purpose, and of course, who is so and so. But we've tried some others, and they've been fine. But then my intuition says, why don't you ask this one for the next year or so? See what you get there. So it's just been a lot of fun. And it's been fun here in this hour. And I thank the two of you so much.
Richard, you're great. We love and thank you for including Andy in this joyous conversation. How wonderful is that?
We'd love to have you with us every time. Both of you.
It's just been great fun, and just so appreciate you, Richard, and what you're doing. And thank you for inviting us.
So we send to you and your audience blessings of light and love through sound. We end with, we heal the planet.
We heal ourselves.
We heal ourselves.
And we heal the planet.
We have a choice, and we can make a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're talking, folks, about World Sound Healing Day. Please participate. The 14th of February, 2023. It's the 21st anniversary. Please get involved in whatever way you choose. Go to the portal, worldsoundhealingday.org, and find out more. We are linked to that website. And I thank you again for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal and Jeanette, I am still listening.